are no words. Feel a song that's never been heard. How do you know when you hear the call? What do you do when you've done it all? Cannonball. 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 It's not what you do, it's how you do.
You've joined the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and tonight I've rented The Cannonball Run. Now, apologies that this sounds a little bit different, but the introduction I recorded with my guest didn't come out. My guest for The Cannonball Run was Dean Newman, who's the chief writer for the Daily Jaws. There are some outtakes at the end, but if you're afraid of birds, you might want to fast forward a couple of minutes. Here's Dean.
I mean, I guess first off, I have to say the Cannonball Run is sort of legendary in our house. I think it was probably the first video we ever rented. It was on Betamax, quite fittingly. Top loader, of course. And that's not why it's legend. Oh my God! So I've got a bird squawking in the background here. Tell me if that's ruining things. I'll move.
No,
the
it's
bird.
good. It's a bit of sound effect. My dog will start.
Okay. So, hang on. Actually, if I turn the other light off, hang on. It thinks it's daylight for some reason. Hang on. Okay, so what makes it legendary, though, in our house is that we went up to our local video shop, which was called Video Magic, which was a little place just above a cost cutters. And my dad asked for that Cannonball movie,
Ooh.
which, if you remember, was the Boys in Blue, which is a remake of an old Will Hay film. It also had John Pertwee in it. But actually, so my dad asked for that. And actually, when we got home, he put the video in, and it was the Cannonball Run. So we've been giving the Cannonball Run instead of the Boys in Blue, instead of the Cannon and Ball film, as he called it. So I did happen to catch it on ITV 3 or 4 about 5 years ago. It's not good. We dodged a bullet that video rental night. Although I think somewhere in an alternate universe, I'm doing a podcast with you about the Boys in Blue. So it's like sliding doors, or I guess more gull wing doors to be precise.
To be fair, I think at some point the Boys in Blue would probably pop up. I think that was 80s. I remember that as well. And I'm sure if that had happened with us, it would be my dad saying we ended up with some American shite. And to be fair, he was the one who, when I was about 8, rented Predator, thinking, well, it can't be that bad. And just as my mum walked in a bit with the skinned bodies. But that was the joy of video clubs, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, weirdly, that was how you came to find Cannonball Run, and that was how we kind of got chatting on Twitter, was over the Christmas schedules. ITV was showing some program called Cannonball, and it seemed to pop up regularly. I mean, I noticed it myself, and I thought, oh, brilliant, they're showing Cannonball Run. And, of course, it was some poxy game show that clearly stealing from the fine film.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have even settled for Cannonball Run 2 and Tony Danza and an orangutan. Perhaps wouldn't have settled for Cannonball Fever, but never mind.
But we could maybe come back to those for a future episode.
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be fair, Cannon and Ball actually would have probably fitted in really well with a Cannonball Run. Probably a lot better than Tony Danza and the orangutan, to be fair.
It's strange that for anyone who hasn't seen this film, and if you haven't, I strongly suggest you do before you carry on. This film is pretty much, and it always was in my eyes, a real life version of the Wacky Races.
Yeah.
You've got, the idea is based on a real life sort of road race, but different people in contraptions enter this sort of cross USA race from Connecticut to California, and all sorts of japes on the way. You've got souped up motors, some really sort of rather larger than life characters, and yet it seems to have sort of stuck in the psyche a little bit in the way that the Wacky Races does.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, I guess for those who haven't seen it, I guess it's kind of Wacky Races meets the Fast and the Furious. Or I guess more, the Fast and the Hilarious, I suppose you could call it.
I mean, this film has got such a a strange and diverse cast. You've got everything from Burt Reynolds, probably at, I'd say, around the peak of his fame. You've got Roger Moore bang in the middle of his stint as James Bond. You've got Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. If this was one of these films now with, where it's set around Valentine's Day or New Year's Eve with these really crazy casts, and yet while they don't interact a huge amount, everything about it just seems to be sort of set piece, but they really do sort of play to their strengths.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you say it flips from setting up one character to another, and essentially everyone else is, an extended cameo bar Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise. But, they're the glue that kind of holds it all together. Yeah. And, it doesn't hang about at all. Even in today's sort of like fast editing and stuff, it zips from one kind of setup to another. And I think that's quite fitting for a film about speed.
At the start, the opening scene is the Lamborghini sort of being chased by a police car and stopping to graffiti a 55 speed limit sign. Just sort of sets the tone for the rest of the film, really. Although, of course, it's a Lamborghini with a lady in a very tight leotard. So,
yeah. And that police car, it's not just a police car. It's a Trans Am. So it's great. And as that's happening, you get the names Burt Reynolds, you get the names Roger Moore, and the title coming up and stuff, and it's kind of you're kind of sold on it just from those moments alone.
I mean, it's funny that in the sort of 9 months or so since Roger Moore died, a lot of his back catalogue and career past of James Bond seems to have come a little bit more to the fore. But I didn't seem to realise at the time, and I was quite young when I saw it the first time, and watching it back again, having seen various documentaries and stuff about his life. His role in this film is a cross between Roger Moore and James Bond, where he's essentially pretending to be Roger Moore, but acting like James Bond.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I think Moore's sublime in it, really. I mean, his character's Seymour Goldfarb Jr., who believes he is Roger Moore. I think that was the closest they could. I think originally they did want him to think he was James Bond, but obviously there'd be all sorts of lawsuits there. I mean, even the Bond theme is the Bond theme to Half an Inch of Its Life, I think, just by one note. And also car-wise, this is the only time Roger Moore actually got to drive in Aston Martin. All the other Bonds doing Bond films, but he didn't. He did in this one.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like the circle's complete a little bit. And to sort of stick on the Moore theme, I mean, there's so much to discuss elsewhere. But there was some, obviously, the links to James Bond, but there were so many with the music and the car and everything else that apparently Hal Needham did sort of showed some interest in directing. I think, was it Octopussy? And Cubby Broccoli basically countered his argument with, well, maybe we should sue you for your Cannonball Run.
Yeah. Well, I believe as well, something which Roger Moore apparently kind of sort of nixed in sort of like 2014 or something. But apparently the rumour was going around that, because he was wearing the tuxedo and stuff like that, that it was then written to subsequent Bond stars' contracts that he, that no Bond was able to wear a tuxedo in another film. So, when you look at sort of like Brosnan in the remake of the Thomas Crown Affair, etc., there's no tuxedo or anything like that. So it's, so it sounds like that kind of thing is kind of stuck since then.
Sort of my favourite bit that I noticed, it was towards the end of the film, and there's not a huge plot to give away, but he's talking to a young lady and they're in the sort of Californian heat, and he's saying how hot it was on the set of The Fly Who Bugged Me, and it was so clearly added in post-production. And this is just it. It was, and of course on the journey, I think there are 5 different women in the car with him across the country, and they're all dubbed by the same person. But it's just, brilliant, and the fact that you can't imagine Daniel Craig doing that, really, can you?
No. Although Timothy Dalton was in the sort of Looney Tunes thing, wasn't he? The one with Brendan Fraser. So, I'd like to think, and I think Brosnan would do it, but certainly Certainly not Craig. Can't see Craig doing it, which would be a shame. Stick them all in it. Stick them all in one. Bring the Cannonball Run back and
I
do
think
that.
there must be
great.
some sort of remake they can do, and as you say, it kind of there is a link to perhaps it's a Fast and Furious sort of thing where you can get some strange mix of stars throughout the country, throughout Hollywood, and get them all together, and could get Daniel Craig to replace Roger Moore, and I'm not even sure who Burt Reynolds would be. Probably, I'm sure they'd do someone like Adam Sandler or Will Smith or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, although back to those women in Roger Moore's car, I think the last one actually thinks he's George Hamilton anyway, so they don't even think it's Roger Moore.
Yeah, it would have been funny if they said it was George Lazenby.
Yeah, yeah.
It's sort of as you said earlier, the main characters within the film are JJ and Victor, who Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise. Now, Burt Reynolds at his handsome, mustachioed best, and Dom DeLuise, who's a very delicate character. He's sort of makes frequent references to someone else or him, as they say, and it's there's such a strange little dynamic between them, isn't there?
It is, but I don't know what. I don't know whether it's because it's always worked and they've always been there since childhood, or it just works. I don't know. I can't explain it, but it does. I mean, I know critics weren't big fans of the Cannonball Run, but I think it's brilliant. There's kind of, you don't get anything like that anymore, and it is. I think even with age, it's kind of harks back to those kind of it's a mad world, and there's magnificent men in their flying machines, and even right down to the beginning intro with the 20th Century Fox logo. There's a bit of animation which kind of helps it hark back to those kind of Pink Panther sort of films, and also Hal Needham and Burt Reynolds did a similar sort of thing with the Smoking the Bandit series as well.
Yeah, because the opening of the film, the opening part of the film, where they're looking for a particular vehicle to be the one that they use to drive cross country, and one of the references they make is, should we use a black Trans Am? And then Burt Reynolds says, no, that's been done. And
that's great. I mean, even as a kid, I got that reference. So it is, it's such a knowing film. It's knowing, and I think it's sort of like confident as well. And I don't know, it just rides it, and it's not perfect by any means, but it just works. It just works.
Shortly after that, as we're meeting the different characters, Sammy Davis Jr. pops up in a bookies to place money on him, and as it turns out to be Dean Martin, playing a sort of washed up former Formula One star. And they decide, in order to, because part of the plot of the film is to avoid sort of police entanglements, as it were, trying to avoid arrest and so on, and they've decided to dress up as priests in the same way that JJ and Victor have dressed up as paramedics driving an ambulance. It's a clever thing, because known for being such hellraisers themselves.
I don't think I can even remember what Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr.'s characters are called. It doesn't matter, because they're essentially all playing themselves. So it's even more fitting, obviously, with the Roger Moore gambit, because he's meant to be playing Roger Moore. So everyone's just playing themselves, and it's just everyone seems to be having a huge amount of fun, and that's evident, I think, throughout the film, and especially so in the kind of outtakes at the end.
Yeah,
it's
I find it strange as well when we talk about some of the cameos and some of the people who pop up. It's the first sort of Hollywood appearance for Jackie Chan, and he has a reasonable, quite a big part in this film. Doesn't speak any English, but him and his colleague have their sort of computer-controlled car, which I suppose is a very nice little lead on into Knight Rider, that sort of thing.
Yeah, Automan, all that kind of stuff. And, I think, so, if they brought the Cannonball Run back, I'd quite like to see it almost like a Cannonball rerun, and it be with all the classic cars from the films and TV series from the 80s. So, whether it be the Fall Guy truck, or, you say, KITT, the DeLorean, all those kind of things, the Dukes of Hazzard car, all that kind of stuff, and obviously Fall Guy and Dukes of Hazzard, all those kind of things kind of played into the Cannonball Run around that time, and there was all those other films, as we said, sort of like Smokey and the Bandit and Every Which Way But Loose, or all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and this was it. There was part of that sort of that range of films where it was about sort of going, driving, exploring, and there were some rather odd japes that people got up to, and yet this kind of took it to that silly level that it bordered on fast to some extent, but it was funny. And I say part of the research for doing this, and you do Wikipedia and IMDb and all that stuff, and at one point this was supposed to be an action film starring Steve McQueen. And I wonder how that would been more similar to Le Mans or one of his films, when this turned out to be infamous and famous in equal measure.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly have seen it working with McQueen as an action film, definitely. And there are still some great action sequences in there. Albeit kind of at either end there's a joke or a laugh, but the stunts are still pretty amazing. And obviously Hal Needham, was a stuntman.
Yeah.
He knew what he was doing. I mean, he was a stunt double for Burt Reynolds at one point. So what he brings to it is fantastic. And actually, he's got a bit of a cameo. He's when JJ and Victor decide that they're going to be driving an ambulance, he's actually the guy in the back of the ambulance as well. So he has his own part to play. An interesting story with that actually is that I guess if it was made today, it would say the following is based on a true story, because Brock Yates, who wrote it, he actually started off the Cannonball Run, I think in 1971. I think the last one was in 79. And in 1979, both Brock Yates and Hal Needham took part in it. And they just so happened to be in the very same ambulance that's actually in the film. So, it's based in fact, folks.
It's nice when you see things like that where an element of truth is in there, and obviously it's hammed up and there's the comedy added in, but the fact that this kind of happened in a strange way, and the fact that I was aware of Hal Needham from my dad watching all these stunt documentaries in the 80s, and all these ones. I can't remember some of the films he did, but where he's dropping off skyscrapers onto airbags and things like that. And it was probably part of that led me to watching this film.
Yeah, I think he actually introduced airbags and the kind of thing that sends a car flipping onto its side and those kind of things. So he helped through both his stunt work and his directing. He kind of really helped legitimize stunt work as a profession, rather than just someone who kind of was unseen and unheard, but just broke their bones. And I think he broke something like 56 bones in his body, his back twice, and all those kind of things. So, he's certainly been through the mill.
Yeah. Again, just basically a film revolving around cars and speed and everything. There is some really great photography of some of this. Some of it is, you can tell it's quite amusing when the scenes in the ambulance in the rain, where it's quite clearly filmed in a garage or something like that. And
poor man's process, I think they call it. Yeah,
and it adds a little bit of the, maybe not the quality, but it certainly adds the charm. You're just reminded that this is still a film on a budget. And
I think as well, it kind of it gives it that kind of classic Hollywood feel as well, because it's a fair few years before CGI and things like that. But it's a bit like the classic Bond films, when Cannonball Run, for instance, when they're coming out the back of a plane on a motorbike, which is still an amazing stunt.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first time it was ever done. They're actually doing it. It's not Arnie in a Razor, blue screened in, or it's not, God forbid, Piers Brosnan sort of kite surfing out from a tsunami. So, you know that they're actually doing it. And, even if, they're actually in a van being rocked from side to side, it's just, pure old school. But I think that's what it kind of celebrates. It's almost sort of celebrating old school Hollywood in a way, certainly with all the sort of Rat Pack people being in there. And I think that was kind of something that was carried on with the sequel, because even Shirley MacLaine's in the sequel, and so is Frank Sinatra for a couple of scenes because he heard that they had such a good time. Although saying that, I don't think his scenes were actually filmed with anyone there, and they ended up using a double for the bits where you could kind of see JJ and everyone. But certainly, the Cannonball Run 2, I think, is a big step down from the first one.
Yeah, I mean, it's often the case, isn't it? But when you think that Burt Reynolds got $5 million to be in this, and even though he read something that he said he felt like he'd sold out, and yet when I know he was in serious films, things like Deliverance and stuff like that, and yet, maybe it's just my age and obviously coming to things a little bit later on where I look at Burt Reynolds and see Cannonball Run and Smokey and the Bandit, and that's the fact that he's had two distinct, or more really if you had something like Boogie Nights, but he's still Burt Reynolds. He's still a legend. Yeah,
definitely. And I think you're right. Those films, have a certain Renaissance feel to them, and it's great. I mean, the theme songs for Smoking the Bandit or Cannonball Run, you can't help but hear them and smile. It kind of almost transports you back, sort of like 30 years or whatever. It's great. I put it up there with the Police Academy theme. If someone's whistling that, you can't help but kind of break out into a smile on your face. It's fantastic, and also, so obviously, Smoking the Bandit was Hal Needham's directorial debut. Then we had Smoking the Bandit 2, which also had Dom DeLuise in it. Then it was Cannonball Run, and obviously didn't feel he'd sold out that much because '83 he did Stroker Ace, which is sort of like a NASCAR kind of racing thing. Also had Bubba Smith in it from Police Academy films, and that was Hal Needham one. He was just at the end of Smoking the Bandit Part 3, and also '84 obviously was Cannonball Run 2, and that was kind of like the end of his kind of comedy vehicular films, I suppose. But he had a good run.
He did, and sort of again, maybe it's just in this country that you feel like Dom DeLuise wasn't as big, in the way that I'm sure most people know who Burt Reynolds are, for example. But Dom DeLuise has been in so many things. He's been in so many films, often slightly smaller roles, or those. I think the first thing I'd always remember him was in Spaceballs. I think it was Pizza the Hut. I think he was.
Yeah.
But his role in this, sort of JJ's sidekick, really, and yet he has this really bizarre alter ego, Captain Chaos.
Dun, dun, dun! I am Captain Chaos.
Who saves the day, and all these, well, he gets them into trouble a couple of times too, but the blazing saddle style punch up scene at the end, and
that's brilliant.
He basically walks through them all, chucking people out of windows and through buildings and everything. It's such a crazy kind of superhero in the way that perhaps it is your Clark Kent Superman thing, and I'm surprised that maybe if this was made today you'd get some sort of prequel and all about this, and why does he disguise himself as a bumbling mechanic?
I'd watch that. And actually, funnily enough, he did have quite an impact on me, because I know when I started in secondary school, we did cross country and stuff like that. And at the beginning, I'd always run off and do the whole dun dun dun, just so I could say I'd been in the lead. It was a bit like that race at the very end where they're going to kind of sort of put their slip in to be stamped. But of course, I was always knackered after like 200 meters. But then obviously I didn't wear a cape or cowl or anything like that. But yeah, I've kind of fond memories of Captain Chaos, even if just for that. So did have quite an impact on me. But then, when I did start running properly, I was actually quite good at it. So maybe I should have dumped him earlier. But no, Captain Chaos was great. And so it was just so I could say I'd been in the lead. And I just thought he had a cool kind of call sign. So it's great stuff. Although obviously he always wanted to be Captain USA anyway. So.
Yeah, and as we joked about earlier on, that this was one of the first films really that famous for having a blooper reel or an outtakes in the last credits, and this was one of the sort of funnier sets was him basically announcing that he was Captain America and trying to obviously getting it mixed up. And you can imagine, especially by the Captain America of today's standards, being perhaps a similar weight, if more muscular somewhat. But
Yeah, just a little bit, and I believe as well that Jackie Chan was so enamored with the whole kind of bloopers at the end of the Cannonball Run that he then started doing it in the back end of his, so we could roll around laughing at how he nearly breaks his neck and back and arms and all that kind of stuff.
I remember our local video club when I was a kid. They started getting Jackie Chan films in towards the end of the 90s, things like Police Story and My Lucky Stars and things like that. And my brother would almost, wait for the blooper reel at the end because that was where people would either corpse giggling or Jackie Chan. Some of the times when Jackie Chan would look like, how has he survived this one? But the fact that you can trace that back to this film and just shows its sort of impact, really.
Definitely, and obviously, I guess Pixar have resurrected it with, the back of the Toy Story films and Bugs Life, etc. But I think the Jackie Chan one that stood out for me was Armor of God. I think he does this jump into a tree or something, and he's like covered in branches that seem to have impaled him and stuff like that, and he still manages to stick his thumb up at the end. But amazing stuff like that to watch. But so there's nothing quite like that in the Cannonball Run. It's more, people corpsing and fluffing their lines, etc. But I think more films should have those. Stick them in the back end of Daniel Craig's James Bond films.
Yeah, that wouldn't take a lot, to be honest. It's funny, this is one of those films where there's an element of sport and competition at the end, and it is the sort of underdogs who win. It's the two ladies in the leotards again who keep getting pulled over by the police.
Yeah.
And they seem to have a very good way of getting out of their speeding tickets until they meet someone who, let's just say, matches them. Miss Teschmacher from Superman and Superman 2.
Yes, yeah, definitely. No, I didn't realise that until sort of rewatching it, and it was like, I know her face.
Are you saying you weren't looking at it before? No.
Something like that. And also, I'd completely forgot. As you said, the underdogs win, but towards the end, it doesn't actually really matter who does win. And Captain Chaos has the moral victory. He saves the dog, obviously, from drowning. So important life lessons there, I think, for young children. It's not all about the money. It's about saving lives. God damn it.
Yeah, especially if you're a superhero. And I don't like the fact that he was made to feel bad because he saved a dog. And if a woman says my baby, yeah, fair enough. You'd think it's a baby. But if I saw a dog in trouble, I'd jump in after that as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to him turning up in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and then we'll have some overblown Avengers nonsense that he'll pop up in as well. So.
Yeah, and the talking dog that he saved.
Yeah, we'll say one of the other sort of cameos that comes up again sort of a little bit further down the line, and this is what leads to the brawl, is Peter Fonda showing up in the same jacket he wore in Easy Rider, with a huge gang of Hell's Angels, basically starting on the competitors who decided to pose as a honeymoon couple. I mean, that was a plot it wasn't fleshed out a huge amount, but it certainly raised a few giggles.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and driving on one wheel all that way as well. But again, I think that's kind of where. I mean, there's no real bad guys in it apart from, I suppose, Mr. Foyt. That's it, Mr. Foyt. I suppose he's the. No one can ever remember his name, but I suppose he's the one who's kind of seen as a bit bad guyish, I suppose, and I guess also Dean Martin. And oh my god,
Sammy,
yeah, Dean and Sammy. I suppose they're almost like the Dick Dastardly and Muttley of the piece, but they all kind of come together when danger calls. They all come together and they all sort of fight the fight together. So I think again, important life lessons for kind of everyone there. Put your differences aside. and all fight together. And I think that's where Jackie Chan gets to show off some of his skills, both martial arts and comedic as well, to great effect. And not forgetting Roger Moore and his glass jaw,
of course.
obviously.
You don't think James Bond in his prime would go down after one punch, but
No, which is a great.
it's funny you say Jackie Chan's comedic qualities and the fact that at one point he decides while he's driving to start watching a porno film. It's
Yeah, that's true. You wouldn't get that today, would you?
well, the weird thing is with all these modern technology and screens and parking sensors, you probably imagine that maybe people do. I think so my friend's car's got a Wi-Fi adapter built into it, so I'm sure they do on their travels. But it's just little things like that. You notice that perhaps the temptation of driving in a technological marvel gets the better of him.
Yeah, and obviously in the sequel, he was stuck in the same car, but they got rid of his sort of co-driver, and they brought in Richard Keel, better known as Jaws. So Roger Moore wasn't in the sequel, but there was still that kind of James Bond kind of link that continued in the sequel. I don't remember there being any porn watching in the second one though. No. Certainly not from them. There might have been from the chauffeur orangutan, but certainly not from him. Actually, I think the chauffeur orangutan does have a copy of Playboy at some point.
Oh,
so there is that kind of continuing thread in the Cannonball series.
Grand. Well, so I'll definitely have to dig that one out. I think it's been even longer since I've seen that.
Well, I know I did go to buy Cannonball Run 2, and I was that disappointed that I took it back to Andy's Records and I got Cobra instead. So I don't think I necessarily swapped for. It wasn't necessarily a wise swap, but never mind.
No, I mean, I bought I bought a new copy of Cannonball Run for this podcast, and one of those strange things is it came on a Blu-ray DVD double set. My wife,
fantastic!
My wife said to me, "Why have you bought the Cannonball Run in Blu-ray?" And apparently, my reason of why not? It's why would you get this film in full HD? And of course, I watched it in Blu-ray, and some scenes certainly benefited from that. But that's for a further discussion.
Yeah.
One of my favourite parts was again sort of Sammy and Dean doing their thing as the priest, because they managed to convince JJ and Victor to pull over to bless them. They wanted to bless them on their journey, and obviously they got out and slashed the tyres. But one person we haven't mentioned so far is Farrah Fawcett, who she's supposed to be there photographing the race and everything for Mr. Foyt as his evidence of the race's sort of impact on the environment and so on. She gets kidnapped in a way by JJ and Victor, and she's in the back, and the doctor, Dr. Van Helsing.
Yes, he's brilliant.
He's just creepy and wonderful, and he's one of these strange people that Victor found in a bar.
Yeah, don't ever tell me where you found him.
Yeah. And the fact he always seems to have a syringe full of some strange, obscure fluid that
which Dean Martin drinks later on.
That certainly had the desired effect. But as Dean Martin sort of opened the boot of the side of the ambulance and found Farrah Fawcett in there, he said, "Oh, I gotta bless her." There was just that.
Yeah, they are. Everyone really zings off each other really well, and the guy playing Dr. Nicholas Van Helsing, he's actually a sort of stalwart cowboy actor. Jack Elam. He was in all sorts of stuff from Once Upon a Time in America to Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, Hondo. He was even in Cactus Jack, which was a comedy cowboy with Kirk Douglas and Arnold Schwarzenegger, which was actually directed by Hal Needham. So they've kind of, he's obviously brought some of his good old boys together just to kind of have a bit of a laugh. And he's got a fantastic big goofy smile. I think growing up, although I really like JJ, he's a bit smug, but I really did like the good doctor and Captain Chaos, Victor. So I think for me they were the two that I really loved.
Every part of it seemed to work so well, and I I guess sort of Reynolds probably has the most screen time, I suppose, but everyone just seemed like they were having so much fun making it, and that's part of the beauty of the outtakes reel at the end. And some of the scenes when even you can look in the background, I think of the final scene when Victor's been overtaken for the win by one of the girls in the leotards, and as he messes up his Captain America, Captain USA line, even you can see Roger Moore cracking up in the background.
Yeah, it was Mr. Martin's fault. Mr. Martin's fault, apparently. Couldn't to the outtake, but yeah, no, they all seem to be having a real blast. And I hate those films sometimes, or TV programs where you see that everyone's having a good laugh, everyone but the audience. But here, I think it really comes over really well, and you can't help but kind of enjoy it, even if it's quite a basic level. It's never going to win. It was never going to win any Oscars or anything like that. But I think it was something like the 6th highest grossing film in America that year. So and that was the year of Raiders of the Lost Ark and that kind of thing as well. So it kind of really did come out speeding, and I think it's done really, really well.
Yeah,
and I think it still stands up. I know it's kind of like a movie of its time, but certainly I'll be looking forward to introducing it to my 7-year-old daughter just to see what she likes about it. Well, she wanted to watch the Police Academy films, so we've done those. So this seems to be the next logical step really for me.
Yeah, so I've got all this to look forward to. My so one of my daughters, she's my only daughter at the moment. She's 20 months, so I think if they ever do a Cannonball Run with the Teletubbies, and then we might be in business. But I think I've got a couple of more years to wait. When number 2 comes along shortly, I think I'll be interested even more, and it'll be one of those scenes where my mum walked in and found the fact that the part with the skin bodies at Predator, and it'll be that where my wife walks in and sees me and my daughter watching something absurd, like let's say it'll either be this or Smokey and the Bandit or something like that.
Yeah, it's the circle of life.
Yeah, I don't start. She'll want to watch The Lion King.
But the good thing, it does stand in good stead is I think Cartoon Network have just brought back Wacky Races.
Oh, good.
They've got as many competitors, but they have just brought it back. So it's a good starting
I'm
point.
sure the originals will still be on YouTube somewhere.
Oh yeah, definitely. Not as good as the originals, definitely not.
But one thing we did forget, and Foyt playing this character who seems intent on basically spoiling everyone's fun. He's like the guy from Ghostbusters, the EPA official who tries to shut him down. He's sort of comes along, and at the end when he starts berating everyone, saying they raped the American highway, and decides he gets himself a cigar and goes and sits in Roger Moore's car. And one of the running gags through the film is that because he's driving in a Aston Martin DB5, of course there's going to be an ejector seat in there. All these girls who are in Roger Moore's car, and they're trying to use the cigarette lighter, because in this one it was in the cigarette lighter rather than the gear stick, and yet it's Roger Moore who gets ejected into the water. He goes in to test it, and it's kind of blown back on him, really.
Yeah, and I think it kind of, I think it's testament to the film, and also to that Roger Moore was quite happy to send his persona up, and as you say, I think since his death, with kind of people who didn't know got to see that a lot more, that he was quite never happier than being self-deprecating about himself. So I think that's kind of perfect for it. I think that he worked on it for about a week or so. So I think Al Needham was saying in the commentary, and I think most of the other people who were kind of bit players and things, they were like 2, 3, 4 days or so. But obviously at the beginning and at the very end, where that sequence takes place, they were all together. But it must have been one hell of a rap party.
You can imagine if I'm sure Burt Reynolds was a bit of a hellraiser and had all the others in. This was Roger Moore really in the middle of his sort of 7-stint run as James Bond. It's the same year that For Your Eyes Only came out. It's around the time he was starting to sort of broaden out. He was doing things like sort of North Sea Hijack and things like that. And this was really just trying to see now how characters try and reinvent themselves sort of after being typecast, yet he was trying to do it during. I mean, his James Bond was always remembered as being certainly the lightest of the six. You know, the fact that he'd parody himself in basically a glorified piss take. In fact, it just shows, coming back to this a year after he died, it just shows how fondly he's remembered, and for more than just one character.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I guess some people would argue that he was only really one character, and that was Roger Moore, I suppose. But and some people would argue that about Michael Caine and Sean Connery. But you know, I think they're wrong on all counts, really. Just because, you know, they're going to look and sound like Roger Moore because they're played by Roger Moore. So you know, it's gonna be like that. And you know, I think, as you say, certainly people like Brosnan and etc. They'll try to reinvent themselves post Bond and even Connery. But yeah, say he was trying to do it while he was doing it. You know, it's just a shame that we ended up with things like Boat Trip. But never mind, can't be helped. You know, I'm a big Roger Moore fan, so you know it's great to kind of see him. One of the lures for me for the Cannonball Run, probably when I was little, because it was that kind of. It's got action, it's got comedy, it's got Roger Moore. You know, it's you know, you could see it almost as an unofficial Bond film in some ways, I suppose, when you were little. You know, where all the lines are blurred. So you know, it was just kind of, you know, along for the ride, whether he was in that or North Sea Hijack or you know, anything else. You know, anything else like that.
And I suppose it's fitting as we come to an end here. It's the scene where it was really his introduction, and go back to the start where he was talking to his mother and she found a gun under his bed, and yet saying, I'm Roger Moore, and yet he has a toy gun with a bang flag sticking out the end. It's just...
Oh, I so wanted that when I was younger. Yeah. I did actually end up with a Walter PPK that was a toy one, which was used from A View to a Kill, which had the holster you could wear on the inside as well. So although that did get broken when I kind of rather too playfully smashed it on someone's head, I did have to buy a replacement several years later. So it is upstairs gathering dust somewhere like the Ark of the Covenant. So yeah, you know, he's great in it, and I think, you know, everyone's kind of at the top of their game and things. You know, and even as a child, you just kind of watched it and you knew who Dean Martin was, and you knew who everyone else was in it. So it was just, even if you didn't know their names, you knew them from other things. So it was that instant recognition, and it was just, you know, I think it's just a joy to watch then, and there's a lot to recommend it now. Definitely.
Yeah, so it's in some ways it's aged sort of well, in that even as you grow older, you can look back and you know a bit more, and you've explored some of the back catalogue of some of the actors in there, but it's still fun. It's dated, but it's fun. It's what a film should be, really.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't think I think that was all it set out to be, was just a fun ride, and you know, and we were along for the ride from start to finish. So, and we've had as many laughs as they've had, whether it's in the film or through the bloopers at the end. So, you know, I think it's certainly still the Cannonball fun for me, definitely.
Well, say it was really good film. I really enjoyed watching it again. So, Dean, where can we find your writings? Because you write for the Daily Jaws, don't you?
Yeah, I'm kind of like the chief writer for the Daily Jaws. So so there's all sorts of stuff from interviews and features and kind of Q&As and things. So there's all sorts of stuff on there, and all sorts of new stuff to come in 2018, especially with Jaws 2 and Jaws 3D having major anniversaries. And of course, Jaws 3D was covered on one of your earlier podcasts as well. So I'll be sinking my teeth into that at some point as well.
Full pun intended, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. Always.
Right, well, we're going to put the brakes on this, and I guess we'll have to rewind it and return it to the video shop. So, Dean Newman, thank you very much for joining us on the Betamax Video Club.
Thanks for having me.
I warned you not to interfere in my affairs.
Stephen, put away Seymour, excuse me.
That's all right, I'll answer to anything.
Yeah.
You see, even in the deepest family relations, My business is not worth a...
Thank you, Victor. As you probably know, we're the favorites to be the winning racers tomorrow in the Cannonball race, which is going to be reported. Good evening, ladies.
Evening. Hello.
My name is J.J. McClure. This is my... Next year, we're going for the no.
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Hey, better than...
We have to get this woman, the senator's wife, to Philadelphia by... Make that California, will you?
We're very close.
Because if I had enough time, I would take those rosary bleeds and stuff them up your nose.
These bleeds?
Those bleeds there.
You gonna take these and shove them up?
I'd take these bleeds here. What? I don't care. I don't care.
Stop laughing.
I don't care because you're gonna get a slap. I always wanted to be Captain America. It's a living. Oh, I'm so sorry. He left first. Mr. Martin laughed first. Why were you laughing? Well, because he laughed and you hit me.